What's shaking, everybody? Welcome to the Orange Bloods Recruiting Hour here on Orange Bloods Live. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Chad Hastings. Freudian slip there. That is Jason Sukamel. And we're going to talk some Texas football recruiting today. Hit that thumbs up button despite me. Subscribe to the channel, get notifications, all those things. Just knock them all out. And by all means, if you're watching this live, jump into the Specs chat and send us your comments. Send us your super chats. We're leaving room for questions today. So we've got some stuff that we're going to talk about, who we think the next commit is, who we think the next commit might be, if it's not the guy that we think it is. But we'll take your questions in the Specs chat as well. So fire them in and we'll have a good time. Jason, when we talk about who the next commitment for the Texas football program is it just as simple as running back James Simon out of Louisiana in less than a week, and that's that?
Yeah, he would be the overwhelming favorite, right? I should know. Is it the 29th? Is that his commitment day? I thought it was Wednesday.
So, yes.
So it'd be a week from today. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I was thinking today was Thursday for some reason, but yes, you're right. A week from today, the 29th. He would be the overwhelming favorite catch if we were placing odds. I know when I say overwhelming, it'd probably be 20-1 odds. I don't think anybody else is going to pop before James Simon. We've got official visits starting up again. A lot of schools are doing them starting May 31st. Texas isn't. They'll do it the following weekend. They'll start theirs. But, most guys at this point are going to wait and take some official visits and then decide in either late June or July or even August. But James Simon, he's got a date on the books next Wednesday, 1 week from today. I think it's in, around lunchtime or something. So I would think he'll be the next commitment, barring a pretty significant surprise.
All right. So you and I agree. I think we both have future casts in for Texas on James Simon. I think you sent yours in. Mine was fairly recent. I think I'd forgotten to make a
same. No, mine was fairly recent. I did have him on the recruiting board. I'm looking back. That was just last week, actually, less than a week ago, last Thursday. I had him at 75% Texas. And
that's pretty high for you.
For me, that's high. And I was about to say, for me, I might be underselling that one a little bit. I think I could probably comfortably have gone a little higher than that.
75% from you is like 325% for mere mortals. So
hey, this is funny, dude. I'm looking at our future cast, and we did not do this on purpose. Like, I didn't know that when you put yours in, or when you didn't know that I put mine in. We were both on May 13th. You were at 2:07 p.m. I was at 2:10 p.m. And that wasn't something we discussed. Yeah, dude. Like, you and I did not sit here and discuss, like, hey, let's get our future cast picks in. So, yeah, that was May 13th. So last Monday, 3 minutes apart, we put our future cast picks in. So.
That's weird. Sometimes I find myself going through the database and I'll click on a guy's profile and oh crap, I haven't put in a future cast on this guy. And I don't know what I was going on with James Simon on the 13th, but I guarantee you I ended up on his profile page and looked at it and realized, oh, I haven't made a prediction. I think you had one in on Jackson Christian way before his commitment. And then when we knew that Jackson Christian was literally on the verge of committing, I was like, oh, I don't have a pick in. So I won't do that horseshit thing where I had my stats ruin his moment. In like 30 minutes before he commits. I just let that one go. Let me ask you this. And I mentioned I was going to ask you this. We normally don't prep ourselves before we do this. We just wing it. But if we took Simon out, because there's a lot of speculation, at least Texas fans want to believe it. Then when murmurs popped up in the last week that Texas had received a silent commitment, if you will, not one that's gone public, there's been some Decory and Moore discussion. That feels very aggressive to think that he would be the next guy, because I fully expect him to take the 3 visits that he's outlined that he's going to take. If he was going to commit to Texas and do it without taking the visits, he could have just said that without saying that he was going to take the visits. So I don't think it's going to be him, because it would have to be in the next week or so. And he's got visits scheduled with Ohio State and with Oregon and obviously Texas on the 14th. Is If you had to pick somebody else, it couldn't be James Simon, who would you pick?
Well, yeah, you told me you're going to ask that, so I'm a little prepared for this one. And DeCorian's a wild card, dude. I mean, who thought that he was randomly going to decommit on a Thursday night in May, right? I mean, we all thought he would probably decommit at some point, but I wasn't sitting by the computer last Thursday at whatever time, 10 o'clock. Thankfully, I had notifications on my phone and I was on my couch 5 feet away from the computer, but I wasn't sitting there waiting for DeCorian Moore to decommit. So he's a bit of a wild card. I think he's going to announce for Texas at some point, but I'm with you. I think he takes his official visits. And, this whole silent commitment game, like, okay, we heard around, I don't remember, noon that Jackson Christian committed, right? And we knew he was going to announce that later that night or that next day. So to me, okay, so I kind of teased it on Orange Bloods and on Twitter. I'm like, hey, I did the gif of me typing up a story. And I'm like, okay, that's me. That's a silent commitment, dude. I don't know that I really like silent commitments when guys are going to take 2, 3, 4 other visits. I'm like, okay, is that really a commitment? That's kind of a silent, strong lean almost in my book, okay? Because those things can change in a hurry. But so I was looking at my recruiting board that I posted last week, and I'm going to read off the guys that I have at 50% or higher, okay? And then I'll tell you who, if I was going to pick, who would be my pick to be the next commitment. I've got Kelshawn Johnson, the wide receiver out of Hitchcock, at 65%. I've got Jamie French, who someone just mentioned, Mike in the chat just mentioned. I've got him at 55%. I've got the next one would be Michael Fasusi, the lineman from Louisville, 60%. I've got the Coleman twins from Cedar Hill, Jordan and Devin Coleman, at 55%. I've got John Mills out of San Francisco, 55%. I've got, if I go down to defensive tackles, I've got Zion Williams from Lufkin at 60%. Riley Pettijohn, 60%. Jonathan Cunningham, 65%. 2 linebackers. And then defensive back, I've got Caleb Chester at 60%. So in theory, I could probably have future casts in for all those dudes. I mean, I should, I guess, right? If I think they're all going to wind up at Texas. But if I'm picking one, I think I'll go with Jonathan Cunningham, and then I'll tell you why. He's going to visit Texas, and he's got a few other visits. And I asked him, like, hey, dude, is it possible you just shut it down on that Texas official visit? And, I mean, because I think Texas is the clear team to beat there. That's the 14th. He'll be there the same weekend as DeCorian Moore. And he didn't say no. He was like, yeah. He goes, man, just whenever. He goes, I could just make a decision whenever. So, I could see Cunningham making a commitment. Another one is Kelshawn Johnson. He's always said, hey, dude, I'm probably going to take my visits. Could just happen whenever. Jamie French, I think, will take some visits. I saw Mike's comment, but I do think he winds up at Texas as things stand now. But I think Ohio State's going to still maybe throw a curveball or two in that one. So I guess if I'm going with one, and I don't think there'll be one before James Simon, but I'll go with Jonathan Cunningham, the linebacker out of North Crowley, as a bit of a wild card pick.
Pettijohn's a sneaky one. I don't think it's going to happen in the next week, but he feels like such a Texas projection. I've seen nobody that is doing anything other than projecting Pettijohn to the Longhorns. I wonder if, we get to June, and it does feel like every year Sark has a couple of guys that commit a little bit earlier, like that week before the fourth round of visits on the 14th. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody popped, and it's right about then that you see Texas trying to, I can't help but think of when CJ Baxter committed, and then Arch, the Baxter commitment was kind of hanging out there. There was a lot of conversation that it was about to happen. Arch kind of happened earlier than I think we thought it would. They were trying to rustle up momentum and to affect the Jonte Cooks of the world. And it really worked. That 2023 recruiting class picked up a lot of steam in June. We saw it again last year. I keep wondering who might take a visit or two, say on the 31st or the 7th, and then leading into the 14th, just go ahead and announce a decision because they've already made a couple of visits. So they've kind of got a sense. They've done the visit thing a little bit,
I got two options for you, if you don't mind me jumping in.
Okay,
So on
yeah,
the
go for it.
7th, Texas is we've got 4 guys right now set to be on official visits. Oh, Josiah Sharma, who's a defensive tackle out of California, Caleb Edwards, a tight end out of California. I don't think either one of those dudes are going to do what you're saying and maybe commit right after that visit. But the other 2 visitors, Michael Terry, the wide receiver out of San Antonio, and Caleb Chester. Caleb Chester's a guy that, I've got him, I think it was 65%, I just said, the DB out of Fort Bend Marshall. I think both of those dudes might come down to Texas or Texas A&M. Michael Terry's already taken a visit to, I think, Nebraska. I could see a scenario where either one of those guys might go to Texas on the 7th, fall in love, want to save their spot, make sure they lock up their spot, and go ahead and commit pretty quickly. So those would be 2 names that we're talking about, guys who take a visit on the 7th and then maybe commit before that, next round of visits. Those would be a couple guys to watch pretty closely.
Interesting comment here. And remind me to circle back in a second because Des distracted me from the point that I was about to make about the kind of silent commitments. We're going to talk about Miles Davis in a second, and not the jazz singer, but wasn't too far away from last year when that whole thing happened. Des says Jason Parker Thune says we're getting none of Fasusi, Rogers, or Haywood.
Well, everybody keeps mentioning Haywood. I mean, Texas isn't even recruiting him, so take him out of the mix, okay? Texas never really prioritized him. He's never even visited Texas, so Texas is just focused elsewhere. I mean, listen, I don't agree with Parker, but it's not out of the question. I mean, Michael Fasusi is not a slam dunk. I mean, Oklahoma's still very much in play there. Texas A&M still very much in play there. Missouri's in play. Oregon. He likes a lot of schools. I think it'll come down to Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. I do think Texas is the team to beat there. And a big part of the reason is Texas can't afford to not win on Michael Fasusi. They need that next, blue
That would
chip.
be a big blow, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, they need their next Kelvin Banks. They need their next franchise left tackle, and that's what I think Michael Fasusi is. Texas doesn't lose, Catch. You know it too. I mean, they got really good people, obviously good recruiters. Coach Flood's a good recruiter, but they got good people when, behind the scenes. When they need to win a recruitment, Texas does a good job with those. So that's part of the reason I'm favoring Texas in that one. Lamont Rogers, I don't have Texas as a favorite there either. So I think they're certainly in the mix. But,
Lamont
I don't know.
Rogers, the moment he left his last visit to Texas in early April? When was that round of visits?
It was April. He was the April 6th weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was 7 weeks ago-ish. I'm telling you, you listen to that same interview that I did. When I listened to it and he was asked, who stood out to you today? And when he's dropping the backup left tackle's name, when he knows who Trevor Gooseby is, and he doesn't single out Kelvin Banks, he doesn't single out really anybody other than the guy that he would be competing for, presumably, to try to play at left tackle. And we know that Brandon Baker is on the right side. And so they've got, there's no slam dunk that Cam Williams is just gone after a year. So if that guy wants to play early, I remember listening to that and thinking, I can't remember the last time somebody showed up at one of these. And when asked to name the person who stood out to them, they named the backup at the position that I think they would be aiming for. I've been very lukewarm on Texas's chances with, and I love Lamont Rogers. He's one of my guys. I ranked him.
Lamont told me flat out this spring Missouri was his leader, and I don't think he's lying. I mean, he really likes Missouri and the Missouri offensive line coach, so I don't think anybody should be pegging Texas as the team to beat there for sure.
Fasusi's the guy. And look, I don't think that one's – I was a little surprised that you had Fasusi at, I think you said 60%, because I don't know how to handicap A&M and Oklahoma fully.
Yeah.
But he has gone to A&M several times in the last 2 months. Oklahoma was a school that it looked like it was just going to be kind of a Texas OU battle, and the Aggies have worked their way in there. They have to get Fasusi, because if they don't get Fasusi, this offensive line class starting to look like a dud on paper. And I know that's a harsh kind of thing to say, but the bar in Austin in recruiting at almost every position is, other than defensive tackle, and I feel like we talk about that every day, if it's quarterback, running back, wide receiver, defensive end edge, linebacker, defensive back, the goal is sign one of the very best of the best in the country. Fasusi seems like the guy. And if it's not Fasusi, I don't really know I think this says something that number 2, wouldn't it be Lamont Rogers? And we don't think that's a strong number 2 right now. So Fasusi,
John Mills,
they have to get Fasusi.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Dickinson, John Mills, Jordan Coleman, none of those, with all due respect, those dudes aren't Michael Fasusi. There's the Nick Brooks, the kid out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who's going to visit Texas. He's visited once before, so he's in play there. But I have a good read on him, a good enough read where I can sit here and say, hey, Texas is in a great spot with Nick Brooks. So to me, and I've said this in my Q&A, if they don't get Fasusi, if Texas doesn't get Fasusi, listen, the program's not going to crumble, obviously, but that's a big loss if you don't get Fasusi, because the other guys we're talking about could wind up being really good players, but they're not the no-brainers.
3-year projects.
They're 2 or 3 year projects. Fasusi's a guy, that could come right in, and I don't know that they'll need him to come in right away. Like I said, Kelvin Banks came in right away. They've got somebody kind of waiting in the wings right now, but Fasusi's a franchise left tackle that, I would bet a lot of money that dude will be a high draft pick someday. I think he's that kind of player. So, that's the kind of player they have to have to kind of anchor that offensive line 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
It's in this portal era, it's just hard keeping guys. Hey, in year 3, you got a chance to really be in the mix and be a starter. We saw it with Peyton Kirkland just this past spring. That guy has no business in transferring, really. Like, what did he think was going to happen? And he comes in less than a year, he's out. But in the portal era, guys are going to have itchy fingers when it comes to pushing that button. The thing that without a Fasusi in this class, if they sign 4 or 5, the math says that one of those guys might hit. And the problem is, you got to make sure that if you're going to get 1 out of 5, that that's not the guy who transfers, right? That think about if Peyton Kirkland ends up going someplace and playing, and he's a talented young guy, he just needs time to develop. Wouldn't shock me at all. Hell, who's the guy that went to SMU, the offensive lineman that was all conference last year that couldn't get on the field for Texas?
SMU?
Yes.
I can't even think
of that. He was a tackle. Now I got to look it up.
Yeah, you got me. Hold on. You got me totally stumped. I don't remember who transferred to SMU. Yeah, Fasusi,
about this the other day.
Oh, was it Logan? Someone said Logan Parr. That was
yes.
I didn't even know that he played tackle for them. See, I thought he was an interior guy. So wow.
He was like first team all conference.
Dude, I'm sure I probably saw that somewhere, but I did not recall that. So wow.
Thank you for the guys that reminded me Logan Parr. I literally wrote about this a week or 2 ago in my 10 thoughts from the weekend, and he was such a non-factor at Texas that the moment that I called it out here on the show, I just couldn't remember the name. But yeah, Logan Parr couldn't get on the depth chart at Texas, transfers to SMU, and he was an All-America Conference first-team offensive lineman, if I'm not mistaken. And, is one of these guys that he apparently graded incredibly well in pass protection at SMU. We'll be interested to see what he does in the ACC this year. But, Peyton Kirkland can be that kind of a guy. It just wouldn't shock me if in time he's a very good offensive lineman. I think you and I have had this conversation before, and you usually buck against this. I just wouldn't take 5 offensive linemen if they're not going to be. I mean, shit, that 2022 offensive line class hasn't had anybody depart. But this is about to be year 3. And the only 2 guys that have really hit the lineup are Banks and Campbell, the 2 high-level 5-stars or 5-star-ish offensive line prospect, whether it's Nato Umazulu or we've seen Cole Hudson come in and play, but not quite hit the levels. And then a year ago, it doesn't quite happen. We're waiting for Connor Robertson. We've seen Malik Agbo play tight end, but that was one of the most esteemed offensive line classes in the history of Texas football. And only this year, assuming Cam Williams hits the field, now you've got a 3rd guy, but NATO hasn't quite crossed the line that I think they want to. Connor Robertson, I don't think they're quite ready for him. Malik Agbo, I'm not even sure what the hell is going on with him. I mean, I wonder if he's going to go back and play some blocking tight end like he did last year. He's not really a factor on the depth chart right now. And that's when I talk about the math is you only hit on like 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 guys. When you start talking about low 4-star, high 3-star guys, think about what that 2022 class would look like right now if you took Banks and Campbell out of it, because that's what you would be talking about with this group. It wouldn't have the super blue chip. We can see that guy being an NFL player a mile away. It'd be full of guys who are somewhat lottery tickets, and I think it would make next year's recruiting class. You could probably survive. Let's just call it what it is. That would be without Fasusi. The offensive line class is kind of mediocre. Not to say that any of those guys won't turn out to be fantastic players, but on paper, that's not at the level that you would expect Kyle Flood to recruit at. And then I think as those 2022 guys are starting to come off the scholarship board in a year from now, that 2026 offensive line class, I think, would become really important. For me, I just don't think Texas needs to be in the business of developing 3 or 4 year projects. I think they need to let the Logan Parrs of the world sign with SMU and then poach a couple of guys. But that has not been Kyle Flood or Steve Sarkisian's offensive line plan at all. But, it's an interesting conversation in terms of strategy. I'm still working. Whatever Parker Thune says, I'm still of the mindset that when push comes to shove, Fasusi will be a Longhorn because he's one of the top 3 most important prospects I think are in this class. And precisely because they probably won't get Rogers or Haywood, who they haven't been able to get in on campus, he becomes the guy. And it's rare so far under this staff that they've missed the guy. Anthony Hill, the guy. There's been a number of those in the last few years, and Texas hits on most of them.
Who would have thought Parker Thune would give us so much to discuss?
Thank you, Parker.
Hey, I wonder how much, offensive linemen, I think, more than most positions are probably wired to be a little more patient because, we always say they shouldn't be playing until their 3rd year. Okay. So, it's most guys aren't expecting to come in as true freshmen and play. And then also, I don't know the answer to this. I think the answer is yes, but do they still get that Pancake Factory money every 50K? Yeah. So listen, man, if I'm an offensive lineman, I'm collecting, I'm a league Ogbo. I'm like, your ass better not list me as a tight end. You better keep me as an offensive lineman on that roster because I want to still collect.
Yeah, don't you dare. You better have me listed as an OL.
Yeah, you can line me up wherever, but you better list me as an offensive lineman, damn it. I want that $50K a year. So, but truthfully, I mean, maybe that's part of the reason we haven't seen a lot of turnover because I'm a little surprised, honestly, that we haven't seen more guys along from the offensive line hit the transfer portal. It's been a pretty steady group.
It's kind of crazy that we saw someone leave from the 2023 class before we've seen someone leave from the 2022 offensive line class. People always ask us, do we think one of those guys is going to bail out? It will probably happen at some point. There has to be a loser. But, I think they all think they're going to be starters. Connor Robertson's a real interesting one because Daniel Cruz is behind him. So when we see Jake Majors graduate this year, Connor Robertson will be an older player. Daniel Cruz, though, may be the guy that has more upside. So I think that will be a really interesting competition. You know, if Robertson were to lose that job, I think you'd have to keep an eye. All these guys want to play. I mean, look, Logan Parr, isn't he the new prototype example of these dudes all want to play? They all think they're going to end up in the NFL, and they would rather get on the field and take a chance than to sit around and not play. And Logan Parr is a guy that just wouldn't have even come close. I think he's probably third team tackle right now because I think Trevor Gooseby would have been the left tackle. I think you're probably seeing Brandon Baker. You know, they're not – Logan Parr, had he stayed at Texas, they're not stopping the growth of guys that they think are going to be great players because they have a pretty good player in front of them. So it's funny, you know, Logan Parr, all conference going into the ACC, but Texas, I just don't think it had that guy stayed. We're talking about him more now in his departure than we would have talked about him had he stayed and been in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And like, I'm still surprised. Like, I just never viewed him as a tackle, but good for him.
There you go. Colby says, have y'all done any more research on NIL paying for scholarships to free up scholarship numbers? Colby, they can't do that. Once a guy's on scholarship, you can't mess around. Like it's against the rules. So once a guy, even if Texas isn't paying, let me give you an example. Let's say Texas recruited a guy. Let's say they went out and signed Jonah Williams. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's not likely to happen. But let's say Jonah Williams, they've recruited him as a scholarship player. He gets drafted by a Major League Baseball team. And in the contract, the Major League Baseball team says, we'll pay for your college. If he were to come back, this is the Ricky Williams rule, if you remember when Ricky played with the Phillies. Texas doesn't have to pay for his college, but he still counts against the 85-man roster. You can't once they're deemed as a scholarship player, you've recruited them as a scholarship player, they really can't be stashed as non-scholar. It's against the rules.
But the question keeps coming up, and I'm sure there's a written rule against this, but like, could you bring a guy in and say, hey, we're going to bring you in as a walk-on, but we'll give you $100K in NIL money?
You would have to make sure you don't recruit him as a scholarship athlete.
So no official visits.
Exactly. And look, Bert Auburn, I think every time I update the scholarship board, at least one person says, how come Bert Auburn's not listed? And it's like, well, he was a walk-on, and he's getting enough NIL money that he doesn't have to worry about it. I mean, if he wasn't, his ass probably would have been in the portal. I need to get paid. I need to get some money or something. He's getting enough in NIL that they don't have. Remember, we're going to see very few head coach gives a walk-on a scholarship. Those videos that warms everybody's heart where the head coach stands in front of the team and Michael Taft, come on down, and then everybody stands up and claps. Those are the situations now where NIL can help you out. The problem with a lot of these walk-ons is you give them, and Taft's a good example. Once you put them on scholarship, you can't take them off. So the only way I see these things happening moving forward is if they're seniors, because it's you want that number back a year from now. If Texas is under the 85, which they are right now, they could give a couple of walk-on scholarships, but they almost certainly would want that to be a one-year deal, and they can't take it back in 2025 once they've given it in 2024. So, Colby, there's no research to be done. NIL can help with some of this. If you have a badass walk-on program, this can be really beneficial. I think especially in the kicking game. I don't really understand giving kickers. I think I just survived the Mac Brown years. I've seen so many scholarship kickers come in and suck. And I've seen Mac back in the day would have 4 or 5 walk-on kickers compete for the job. And by the time that was done, someone would emerge, and then they'd end up being kind of a badass kicker. And you'd be thinking to yourself, put that guy on scholarship.
Your starting kicker is a walk-on for Texas. Your backup or your kickoff specialist is what he is a scholarship kicker. So, I mean, we're seeing it right now in Austin. But, and I also encourage everybody to go read Travis Gailey's column on Orange Bloods. He just posted it. It's about there may be no more scholarship limits if there's some lawsuits going on. So that could throw a whole other wrench.
That is true. Colby follows that up with, what if they've never been on scholarship? You're probably in the right territory, Colby. Again, it comes down to they can't have taken an official visit, because otherwise, what's to have kept Alabama over the years from, or Texas or anybody else? You bring a guy in for an official visit. Take Brandon Baker as an example, because that guy came to Texas from California being very open about the fact that NIL mattered a lot to him, and the school that gave him the best NIL opportunities was probably going to be the one that he went to. I think that kid's making between mid to high 6 figures in NIL. You're paying a guy that much NIL. You could throw in the cost of a scholarship inside of that. In a rule where, Colby, they've never been on scholarship, they could stash a guy like that. He probably doesn't care if he's on scholarship enough. What, you're gonna give me an extra $50,000 to make sure that everything's taken care of? Sure, why not? So the rules are in place to keep schools from taking advantage of the situation like this. But Jason makes a really good point. We might be in an era very shortly, by the end of the decade, let's say, where we've seen the 25-man number go away. Will the 85-man number go away? I don't know, but it's certainly something that's being discussed. Nico says, what did you miss? Well, we predicted who we thought would be the next commitment. And then we talked about who we thought would be the next commitment if the guy that we think is going to be the next commitment isn't the next commitment. And you know what? It's a reminder, Nico, because I meant to bring up silent commitments, because there's been that discussion. I just want to reference a year ago, Miles Davis, the safety from Converse Judson. He was one, because you were talking about the guys coming in on June 7th. Mm-hmm. Davis was one of these guys that took the early visit a year ago. And when he left campus, the talk was that he was a silent commitment. Took a couple of more visits. Texas brought other guys that I think they had ranked ahead of him on the pecking order, and then got those guys. And then Miles Davis just ended up not being a Texas commitment. So if they're silent, they really don't mean a lot. They just don't. It's when they go public, that's when it matters. When a guy is a silent commitment, that means he wants to keep looking around and keep dating. He's not ready to be exclusive yet. So
the silent commitments were fun 10 years ago. I remember Mike Davis being one catch. Like, he told us like 2 months before he was committed, but he wasn't taking a bunch of other visits. He just didn't want to announce for whatever reason. Okay, that's a silent commitment I can stand behind. But when you're saying, oh yeah, I gave indication I'm going to Texas or anywhere else, but I'm still going to take my 5 official visits. Well, then, no, dude, you're not a silent commitment. Frankly, I don't give a shit if you went out and publicly said I'm committed to Texas and then took 4 other visits. You're really not even a commitment then. You're a strong lean is what you are. Brandon Brown, I'd say, is a perfect example. Technically, he's committed to Texas. He's on our commitment list. But is he really committed to Texas, dude? He's going to LSU next weekend. He's going to USC, Tennessee. He's been to Florida. So, is he really committed, much less a silent commitment? No, man. If you're taking other visits, I don't really buy the silent commitment label.
This is Trey. You're getting straight to the root of the point. And you know what? Do you think the NCAA would actually do anything if a team went over 85? Trey, do you know what they would do? They'd probably give Lamar the death penalty. Or watch out, UTSA. Don't you they hit the little guys upside the head really, really hard. I It's never happened, Trey.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 30 years. By the way, Jason, I was thinking about this. We met each other in the fall of 1994.
Man, you've got a good memory. I knew it. Well, I was like a junior in college, so yeah, that would have been right. Yeah.
Because the Cowboys did win the Super Bowl that first year that we knew each other. No, it was 95, excuse me. So we're almost 30 years because the TV station didn't start until 95. So it couldn't have been 94. So you and I are almost at 30 years. It's crazy to think. But Trey, in my 30 years, it's my way of saying Jason and I are kind of old. I've never heard of a team going over 85. I don't even know how to respond to what would happen. I've literally never seen it before, but it's against the rules. And oh my God, I would imagine if somebody tried to do more than 85, every coach on this schedule at a minimum would have comments on, well, if they're not going to be held to any rules at 85, then, and they're not, it would be a thing, Trey. I don't know how to tell you like what would happen because I've never seen it happen, but boy, coaches love to get on their soapbox. And if Texas tried to play with 87 scholarship players, believe me, every coach in the country would be watching that situation because if nothing happened, then every coach would say, well, look, Texas is going to do it. We'll do it. I don't know what it is, Trey, but it would be something. I'm just saying.
Yeah, Trey, a former McAllen alumnus, huh? See that?
There you go. Trey, what year were you? I was
long
class of
gone.
94.
When you did your time, he said. Okay.
I don't recognize Trey's name. So he's got to be an 80s McCallum boy. Back in the day when, oh God, they had the Beckett kid who was a first-round draft pick. Why am I forgetting? Robbie Beckett. Robbie Beckett came out of McCallum, class of 87. You're even you crossed over with Robbie Beckett a little bit. Because I think he was class of 89 maybe. Anyway, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're either going to get out in the next couple of minutes or you guys are going to hit us with some kick-ass questions. That's the deal. Because we can wrap this thing up pretty easily, but I want to make sure any more questions, get them in the next 60 seconds. And I don't mean Trey asking us what happens if Texas breaks some rules. Probably nothing, but maybe. I'm going to give you guys just Jason, you got anything else?
You're kind of talking about our schedule. Nothing going on really this weekend for Texas in recruiting. For myself, I'll be busy. My daughter graduates on Saturday. Then the next weekend you'll start some official visits, not for Texas necessarily, not yet, but then June rolls around and it's literally around the clock. It's official visit weekends. It's a state 7-on-7. Rivals has their 5-star event they're going to do again this year down in Jacksonville, Florida. So it should be a crazy but fun, interesting month in June.
Trey, I'm going to let you have the last question of the day. How many 5-stars do you think UT will sign?
That's tricky right now because they haven't handed out all the 5-stars, but if I'm looking right now, I'm giving them Fasusi.
Well, hold on. Let's just start in order of the guys that they're actually heavily involved with. And then we can talk about – so DeCorian Moore is the highest ranked guy on the board right now, 5 stars. You and I are projecting that he'll end up at Texas. That's one. The next guy would be Fasusi. And we're both giving him Fasusi at this point. So that's 2. Jonah Williams is a guy that I still think that might get interesting at some point, but it hadn't happened yet. And you'd have to be the homer of homer at this point to project Jonah Williams going to Texas. Jordan Davis is going to Ohio State. Ty Haywood looks like an OU A&M type battle. We keep on scrolling down. KJ Lacey.
He's not going to be a 5-star catch.
I agree. He's 19th right now. But
they're actually having rankings meetings today and yesterday, and just based on the chatter, I don't get involved in those things, but talking to the guys that do the national rankings, I think KJ is going to drop a bit. So
I don't think KJ Lacey's a 5-star quarterback. So just go ahead and put me on the record right now. When people get mad, I don't know what he'll drop to. He's the highest ranking 4-star player in the Rivals rankings right now at 19. Jamie French, he not currently a 5-star, but I think he will be. He's number 22 in the country right now. I'll give him to Texas. That's 3.
I'm real close to 50-50 on that. I know he's publicly listed Texas as the leader, but I know Jamie's also a smart kid that knows how to play the game a little bit. So I still think there might be some twists and turns there, but I do have him a little over 50% of my recruiting board, so I'll agree with you. I'll give him that one. So that's 3.
Dorian Brew is number 33 in the country right now. I don't know if he gets to 5-star status when it's all said and done. And I don't even know if I'm giving Texas Dorian Brew, but I am doing so while acknowledging everybody else in the industry right now has got him going to Ohio State.
Well, dude, he doesn't do interviews. His family doesn't really talk. I'll be honest. Sometimes I just have a good connections on guys. Some guys, sometimes I just don't. Dorian Brew is a guy that I just don't have a good feel on. And, nobody really that I've talked to has a great feel on him either. So
that's it. I mean, those are the guys
that be in that conversation if you thought Texas was going to get him, but
Keone Armstrong is not going to get that high. He's number 65 in the country. I would have him closer to 30 than 70, but I don't think they're going to quite go that high. Riley Pettyjohn, 71.
Madden Faramo, the number 50, he's a linebacker out of California. He is visiting Texas. So do I think he'll be at Texas? Do I think he'll go to Texas? No, but he's a guy that.
Who's this year's Ryan Wingo, Brandon Baker, the out-of-state guy that we're not identifying in May as a future Longhorn? That will be it's happened the last couple of years.
You talking about super highly ranked guy, or?
Yeah.
I was gonna say I think they get the John Mills kid, but he's a 3-star. But I think that's a travesty. I think his rating's much better. You know what? Nick Brooks, I mentioned him earlier. Nick Brooks might be that guy. He's not a 5-star, but he's a highly ranked guy. I think he's Rivals 250. I lost my
Mike
list.
Torres asks if Texas will ever go the JUCO route. Mike, the JUCO is dead. I don't even know if they play JUCO football anymore.
No, they do, because I saw there was some recruit that people were after, but I don't see Texas going that route. Yeah.
JD just wants to know if you have any info on the one Ohio lady that got arrested for willingly spreading HIV. You got the lowdown on that?
JD, I like to say or think I'm a bit of a Renaissance man. I can do a little bit of everything, but that's one I don't really have.
He's going to Google that when he's off the show.
Yeah, I will, absolutely. Make sure I've never crossed paths with her.
So to answer the 5-star question, I think, Trey, to get back to answer this and move on, I'm going to say 3. That could be 4. But beyond Moore, French, and Fasusi, it's hard to look at 5 stars right now and definitively say that guy looks like a future Longhorn. I fully believe that Sarkisian has the capacity. We've seen him do it, where he pulls some out-of-state rabbits out of his hat. And look, they got Xavier Filsaime late a year ago, so maybe I'm not giving up on Jonah Williams. Although again, don't walk away from this show saying that Ketch believes that Texas is going to get Jonah Williams. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying at some point, especially if Texas makes the playoffs again this year, they just keep the momentum. If Texas keeps riding Jonah Williams and they don't give up, I think they could get involved in that. I'm not convinced that either OU or A&M are going to have good seasons on the field. OU 7.5 wins as a win total right now. It's hard for me to believe that kid goes to play for OU, given the optics of the football program, if that's what it looks like. A&M's the favorite right now, but what if Texas just is so much better than A&M that it becomes the cool thing to do going to Texas. Keep an eye on it. I'm not giving up on that dream yet. Maybe that's just my dream. I love Jonah Williams so much that I want to cover him here in Austin, but don't. There's no future cast of Texas. I promise you. All right, look, we'll wrap up. I already asked Jason if he had any parting shots, so there's no reason to ask him a second time. Guys, do us a solid. Hit that thumbs up button. Do it right now. Just bing. Pop that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Notifications. Go ahead and get them. For everybody who was in the Specs chat, thank you. In fact, because we love Specs so much, just a quick word from Lisa.
Specs same-day delivery can save the day with our Specs app or online shopping. From world-class wines to hard-to-find spirits and craft beers to gourmet foods, delicious snacks, and spectacular sweets. It's Specs. Cheers to savings.
Hey, download that app and let Specs save the day. It's about to be graduation, and you don't have to make that trip with the in-laws and all of the family. You can just order your bevies from Specs and let them deliver. For myself, for Jason, for everybody in the Specs chat that helped make the show just a little bit better today, we thank you for participating. We thank you for watching.